Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the July meeting of the Suffolk Schools Forum. I hope this finds you all well. I'll just run through the list of attendees this morning. I'm Alison Coleman. I'm the chair of the forum, but also chair of the Federation of Fairfield and Colneys in Felixstowe. We also have with us Adrian Orr, Amanda Havers, Angelo Goducci, Christina Lewis, Colin Shaw, Daniel Jones, Debbie Richards, Elle Mayhew, Gemma Morgan, John Tunnelly, Jackie Dyer, Karen Pringle, Maria Kemble, Matthew Ferrier, Michael Quinton, Ashley Jacobs, Paul Firkin, Robert Lenko, Ros Somerville, Sophie Conway, Sue Prickett, and Teresa Spilling. We have received apologies from Ruth Coleman, and Carol Pringle is subbing for Ruth. Also apologies from Councillor Andrew Reid, Sonia Harben and Gordon Jones, and Rowena Mackey has substitute John Tunnelly is with us for Rowena today. Just a bit of reminder for etiquette. Please keep your microphones and your cameras off while speakers are presenting. But if you are making any points or asking any questions, then that'd be good if you could put on your cameras as well as your microphones. And if at that point you could please introduce yourselves as well, that would be really helpful. Darren Woodward has also arrived. Welcome, Darren. And we have one person who is listed as meeting guest. I'd be grateful if you could introduce yourself so that we can record you as being present for the minutes. So, meeting guest, could you reveal yourself, please? Perhaps they've gone away from their camera. I have put a note in the chat asking them to make a note of who they are, so we'll be able to record it for the minutes from there. Okay, thank you very much. So moving on to the next item on the agenda, which is the minutes of our meeting that were held on the 9th of May. Could I please take these page by page for accuracy and matters arising? If there's anything you would like to flag, please call out as I work my way through the pages. So page 1 and 2, 3.
Hi, Alison. Sorry, on page 2. Is it page 2? Yeah, it's around the pupil projections. Sorry, it's Michael Quinton. I'll be on camera in a bit. Just on the pupil projections, the school infrastructure and admissions team is still working on that data. It is normally a summer term job, but hopefully by October we will have all of that data and we can report back to Schools Forum.
Great, thank you, Mike. Anything from page 3 and 4, page 5, 6, 7.
Yes, please, Alison. It's Robert Lenko. Morning. I wasn't at the last meeting. I gave my apologies, and my stand-in Susan Shields was here. Unfortunately, I know Sonia's not with us today, but at the bottom of page 7, she talks about section 151 officers together and was going to report back to this lady called Louise about lobbying. And I reading through it, obviously I'm only getting this from the minutes, it was getting a sort of collective lobbying group to go back because obviously the financial problems are across the whole of the country and affect every LA. I just wondered if that had happened, and I just wondered if somebody could tell me what a section 15 officer does, please. So that was my question.
Every local authority has a section 151 officer, which in effect is the most senior accountant in the local authority. That's the short way of putting Lou's role. Mike, do you have any feedback on the conversation that Sonia had, or do we need to roll that forward to our next meeting? Or when Sonia's back from leave, whether we can ask Sonia to update Robert?
Yeah, I think those conversations have been had, Robert, and Lou is a member of various regional and national groups as well, where this is definitely on the agenda. Again, it might be something, there's a hand up, I can't see who it is, but it might be something
Adrian.
Adrian can also, yeah.
Yeah,
Adrian,
thanks.
over to you.
Yeah, thanks for that. Good morning, colleagues. Adrian Orr, Assistant Director, Education, Skills and Learning. Robert, it's a really pertinent question at the moment because there's quite a lot going on in the background. There's two layers of, well, more than two layers of lobbying. The lobbying that was referred to in that was the Section 1.5 officers up and down the country. And alongside that, there is the lobbying that is being done with the F40 group, which I've mentioned before is a group that should rename itself because there are 42 local authorities that are now part of F40, the lowest funded local authorities for education in the country. There is a lot of activity. I spoke with F40 in the last couple of days. Clearly, everybody is waiting to see who the new Secretary of State for Education will be and who the new schools minister will be, because there will be a new round of lobbying activity both at officer level and through F40. Councillor Andrew Reid couldn't make it today, but he is now a member of the F40 executive group, and I know the F40 executive will be seeking an early meeting with whoever is appointed as the schools minister. Hopefully that's a helpful update on where we are with that activity.
That's very helpful. Thank you very much, Adrian and Michael and Alison. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Thanks for the question. Any queries on page 8? We're back in the minutes now for everybody's lost track. And page 9. If there's no other queries, then we'll have it noted in the minutes that they're accepted as an accurate record of our last meeting. Thank you very much. Okay, so moving on to the next item on the agenda, we've got a verbal update on the SEND position with Gemma. Gemma, I'll hand over to you to introduce yourself. Thank you.
Thanks, Alison. Good morning, everybody. I'm Gemma Morgan. I'm the Head of SEND Funding and Provider Services. I haven't brought a paper to this meeting because, to be honest, there's not a lot of change since the last paper that I wrote for the previous meeting. However, I did think I'd give you a quick update on things that have happened and developments in the last few months. So the DSG Deficit Management Plan. So we share this with Schools Forum on a termly basis. We've recently updated it and we've shared it with the DFE. It reflects the current forecast for this financial year and it's been updated with the outturn, which obviously Mike's going to talk to you about in the next item. I just wanted to let the group know the original attachment that was with the meeting agenda was unfortunately had an error in it. That's been adjusted and the new version that Teresa sent out has got the correct overspend for 24-25. It was showing at 110 million as a cumulative overspend and it should be just under 103, which is what it is now on the correct document which has been submitted to the DFE and which was what we reported to you at the last meeting. So that's just to clarify that. As I said earlier, from a funding point of view, there's no update since the last meeting. We're still predicting an overspend of approximately £48 million this financial year, which will lead to the overall deficit of 103 million that I just mentioned. The team are working hard to ensure our forecasting is accurate and looking to make sure that changes in forecasted are made as early as possible and as less frequently as has happened in the past. Mike's paper, which is coming next, we'll talk about the end of year outturn for 23-24. That does include the high needs block. So that will confirm where we were at the very end of the financial year. The other couple of things that I just wanted to update the group on as well was the moderation from spring term and summer. The last paper, I gave you an overview of the autumn term moderation, because obviously we have to moderate the entire term, finish the moderation before I can report back to you on our findings. So at the last meeting we hadn't finished the spring term moderation. We have now obviously finished that. We've started the summer term. From a spring term point of view, we had 780 new requests for high needs funding in the mainstream settings. This was compared to 483 in the previous year. So this is an approximate increase of 62%. We also received 352 requests for an increased band compared to 135 the year before. So that's obviously a huge increase there. We did, however, receive 69 requests for decreases. So I just take a bit of comfort in that we have got some of our settings that are looking at where they've had a higher band and the child has managed to develop, move on, the needs have been met, they are able to reduce the band. That was 69 in spring term compared to 21 in the previous year. So that's definitely a move forward. Yesterday, I received the update for the current term. So summer term moderation is still underway. We're still going through the Q2 moderation. That should finish in the coming days, and then the funding will be paid to the schools. We've had an increase of 30%. So compared to summer 23, we've had 447 requests for new bands this year, and we had 342 last year. So it's an increase of over 30%. Again, a huge request for increased bands, an increase of 87% from last summer term. I will give a much more comprehensive analysis of the bands across all 3 terms, so autumn, spring and summer for 23-24 at the next schools forum, because I'll have all of that data and we'll be able to do some comparison work to look at how that has stood over for the full academic year in comparison to the previous 2 as well. So I'll bring that in a paper to the next meeting.
Gemma, can I just jump in and ask a question?
Of course.
Were you had you got wind of the fact that you were expecting an increase in the region of 30% requests this term, or was it a complete surprise?
It's not a complete surprise, Alison, because year on year we are now predicting that we're going to see that kind of rise because we're seeing it every year. Previously, and I've said this to the group before, we were predicting that we'd get to a point where we were plateauing a little bit or only seeing increases during those transition years, but that's just not the case. What we are starting to look at data wise is where those increases are, which years are the most where there's the most activity, where there is the most requests for those increases, and all of that I should be able to bring to the meeting next year. But yeah, it's a really interesting question. We are predicting high. We have to now, Alison, because of the previous year's trends.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? Hang on, and I've got to hop to the chat from where I've got views on the hands up. Hang on, hop from one bit to the other. Darren, you could come on and ask your question. Oh yes,
thank
Darren's
you.
talking about the primary role falling. Darren, I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Alison. Just obviously, Gemma, I guess that's on the base. Can we see that the overall primary role is falling in terms of pupil numbers?
Yep.
And I'm wondering if actually the requests are particularly reception year 1.
So that's the analysis that I still need to do and that I'll bring to the next meeting. But yeah, what we need to do now is look at what years we're seeing those increase in those requests. And we've been collecting that data for the last two, maybe 3 years. So we can look at that and compare where it is. But where I have looked previously, it's not in the transition year groups so much. It's throughout the age ranges. So yeah, so we'll see. I'll do a piece of analysis for the next meeting.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thanks both. Anybody else like to ask anything or make any points about SEND? Great. Okay. Thanks, Gemma, as ever.
Thanks.
Okay, see you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, so our next item on the agenda is the DSG spend for 23-24. Mike, I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Alison. Morning, everybody. I'm Michael Quinton, Senior Accountant working in CYP, and I'm covering for Sonia Harvin while she's off on her tour of Italy over the past 3 weeks, so lucky her. So this paper just goes over the 23-24 DSG outturn. There's a bit in there on the high needs block, a recap of what Gemma presented at the forum in May. So Gemma will definitely come in for any further questions on that. I'm sure she'll be pleased to do that. There's a bit in here about the current forecast for 24-25, and then as we do sort of most years, there's a little bit at the end just on benchmarking against our stat and regional neighbours. Okay, so the first thing, again, just an apologies here, in point 5, I think what we do when we look at the papers, we just sort of rehash from what we've done in previous years. And I think we check these papers and we check and check, and obviously we didn't check that bit. So the overspend of 12.1 million is not correct, and I'll take you to the table with the correct figures. It would be nice if the overspend was 12.1 million, but it's not, unfortunately. So if we just, if you scroll down to table 1 in the paper, you've got all the constituent parts of the total DSG that we receive into Suffolk. So you've got the central services schools block, you've got the early years, the high needs block, and then you've got the schools block at the bottom of that table. So overall, you can see that we had a 26.3 million overspend on the DSG last year. Well, all of that, in fact, because it's netted off with some small underspends in other areas, is the high needs block. We've got some small underspends on the CSSB, where we've got some savings or some staff vacancies where we hadn't filled. So there's a small saving on the top line there under regulatory and other statutory duties. We had an underspend on the early years block, but this related to the 22-23 adjustment, which happens in 23-24. So we overestimated the recoupment. So there was actually a greater underspend, if you like. So that's moved into the early years reserves. And then we've got another underspend on the recoupment and rates element of the schools budgets. So that's where schools convert to academies, and there's a slight difference on the rates invoices and any adjustments on that, and then also on recoupment as well. So again, there's small differences with what the LA has on their recoupment and what the ESFA has on theirs. And then on growth, as you know, we've got a just under 2 million budget on growth and falling roles. The amount of growth cases that we have in Suffolk at the moment is falling, and as Darren said, there is a drop in pupil numbers at the primary level. So currently there is an underspend there, and as always, if we do have those underspends on schools block elements, including the growth, then we can look to reinvest that or put that into the schools block for 25-26. So there'll be some decisions that we can make during the autumn term. If I just go down to point 7 in the report, so although we've said that the early years underspend in the table was 192,000, that related to the 22-23 and the difference in the recoupment that happens from the ESFA during 23-24 is quite complicated. But anyway, in 23-24, the activity showed that we were underspending again in the early years area. So we expect the DFE to be recouping just under 600,000 from us in July. Obviously, when that comes through, we'll have a look to see if there's any differences, and then again we can report back in the autumn term, what that difference is. And Christina normally comes back with plans on how we can again reinvest that into early years provisions. The overall overspend on the high needs block was 27.689 million. As I said, Gemma has presented that information about the data, the increases, all of that stuff. There's some tables in here which Gemma did present at the last forum. So if there are any questions on that, again, Gemma can sort of happily step in and answer some of those. So if we just scroll down, and we'll take you down to table 5. So this is the reserve position for the DSG for the end of 23-24, and as you can see, that overspend that we did have in the high needs block of that 27.689 million, that has resulted in a deficit balance on the high needs block of 55.7 million, but overall our DSG deficit as at the end of last year is 54.1 million pounds. So what I've done a bit of digging on other schools forum papers over the past sort of couple of months. Some are fairly easy to actually extrapolate the data that I want to get. So what are the deficits in the high needs block? Others are not so easy. Other local authorities are part of the safety valve, so they've had various debts being written off. But I've got a few just for a bit of context for where we are in Suffolk. So Norfolk, we often use Norfolk as a comparator to Suffolk because they're very similar to us around the way that the size of the county, the demographics, the same sort of urban areas that they've got, very similar to Suffolk. So their DSG deficit at the end of 23-24 was £81.5 million. But a big caveat here, I don't know how much has been written off through the safety valve programme, because they are part of that. They also had some LA contributions to reduce the high needs block deficit of around £6 million in Norfolk as well. So they're doing some different things, and I think that's being part of the safety valve. There are lots of conditions on what local authorities need to be doing. So a couple of our stat neighbours, so Somerset, a much smaller local authority than us, but at the end of 23-24, £56 million deficit on their high needs block. Dorset, again, a smaller local authority than us, just under 60 million deficit. And then we had Devon, a similar size to us, at the end of 23-24, £115 million deficit on their high needs block. And this was after £38 million being written off by the DfE because they're part of the safety valve. So I just thought that would be useful just to have that sort of bit of context around where we are and where we are in comparison to our stat neighbours as well. So, you know, 54.1 million, you could say we were doing quite well. I know we're not, but obviously, you know, if we had the levels of funding, and I'll go on to that in a second, then potentially that deficit could be a little bit lower.
I'll pause you there for a moment, Mike, as Darren's put his hand up. Darren?
Thank you, Alison. Apologies if this has been raised in the previous meeting, as I know I couldn't make the last meeting, but relative to all of that, and obviously a busy day electorally today, and I'm sure everyone on the forum is aware of there's a challenge to the safety valve from a couple of I think it's parents who actually raised a challenge down in the southwest, I think, about the legality of it. How close are we as a local authority to the DfE expecting us to go down the safety valve route?
That might be a question for Gemma to ask. Obviously, we're part of the Delivering Better Value at the moment, and we're one of those local authorities that sits just below those safety valve authorities that have got large deficits. And obviously the management plan template that Gemma produces, that goes off to the DfE for them to be making those decisions so they can compare to other local authorities. But I can see Gemma's just come in, so Gemma,
Ros
just want to
hand up as well. So Gemma, I'll let you go first, and then Ros.
Thank you.
I'm happy for Ros to go because I was probably going to refer to you anyway.
Hi, I'm Ros Somerville,
Hi, Ros.
Assistant Director Inclusion. Hi. Yes, so when we were asked to join the Delivering Better Value, there were certain conditions around how big of your deficit you had in your DSG in the high needs block and what a percentage it was of your overall budget. And we may well now tip whatever that criteria was then. We are on the DBV and we liaise very closely with the DfE concerning that. We have talked to them about is there any review of safety valve and other local authorities joining it. Whilst the debt is, I'm not quite sure it would be considered to be written off. The DfE do draw up an agreement with local authorities and provide them with additional funding. However, there are very clear criteria that need to be met, and that involves bringing back in a balanced budget. Yeah. So it's not without condition, the safety valve, of course, and we're just in constant liaison with the DfE. We're not directly talking about safety valve for Suffolk at the moment. We're part of the DBV. We haven't finished the DBV.
Told to, I guess.
Well, I don't know it quite comes down, it quite works in that way now anyway. From the conversations I've had, we are in close liaison with the DfE.
Thank you.
Thanks for that context, Ros. Thank you. Gemma, did you want to add anything? Or no? Okay, Mike, I'll hand back to you to carry on with your paper. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I guess just the other thing just for Forum to be aware of is obviously the DSG deficit is a ring-fenced deficit in effect in our accounts each year, so it doesn't form part of the sort of the Suffolk County Council total deficit. The DfE have something called an override in at the moment, but that protects that DSG deficit from hitting the local authority sort of coffers. So if that override was to end, I think it's still in place for 25-26, but beyond that into 26-27, if that override was to end and Suffolk has a significant deficit on its DSG, which would have to be funded from core funding, then potentially Suffolk, like a few other local authorities, could be in the position where a Section 114 notice is issued, in effect saying the council is sort of bankrupt and would need to do things a lot differently. So there is that context there, and as Adrian said earlier, we just we're unsure about if there is a new government in, what will happen with DfE DSG funding. It can't reduce any further for Suffolk. We're on that tipping point really at the moment. So yeah, lots of unknowns still, unfortunately. So if we just go down to table 6 in the report, this is just a really early forecast, and this matches to what Gemma has just said and what she submitted on the DSG deficit management template. So overall, we're just forecasting that all other areas of the DSG are going to be on budget for this year, but the High Needs block is forecasting a 48.5 million overspend, which would lead to an overall deficit for Suffolk at the end of 24-25 of just over 100 million. So yeah, just worth mentioning that. And then the other bit that we do each year is just that sort of little bit of benchmarking against stat and regional neighbours. So within the High Needs block, Suffolk is still 111th out of 151 local authorities, so we're still in that sort of that lower quartile. And we always use Norfolk as a reference, so Norfolk are currently 90th as well. We use Norfolk, as I said before, but if we were to have the same sort of level of funding on a per pupil basis, based on all of our pupils in special schools and all of our pupils in all of our schools, then potentially that would be an additional £7 million in our High Needs block. And that would be, say, over the last sort of 4 or 5 years, an extra sort of 30 to 40 million pounds. Then that deficit position that we've currently got of 54 million could be a lot less if we were funded on a similar basis. That might sound as an excuse, but I think that is, again, just useful context to sort of have in our back pocket when we're doing some of that lobbying to the DfE as well. And then in some of the tables, again, you can see where we sit. Again, we are relatively low in our stat neighbour comparisons and in our regional neighbour comparisons as well. Okay, I think I'll really end it there. Thank you.
Does anybody have any points they'd like to raise or any questions for Mike or others about this paper? But I think that was a very comprehensive paper. It was very useful to have all that background spelled out again, especially as we say when we're in the process of being ready to do a lot of lobbying again about the lack of funding not meeting need. If funding was according to need, then we'd be in a very different place.
Yeah, I think so, and it is down to that 17-18 historical element still. So we're only funded of our total High Needs block, I think it's about 24%, whereas I think Norfolk are up around the 29% mark. So it makes a huge difference. And going back to 17-18 and those that were here and on the forum back then, you'll know that the service were trying their utmost to balance the books. And I think there were some local authorities that weren't in that position at that point in time. And obviously that's a disadvantage to us now. So that's definitely one thing that we're also looking at as well. And I think what me and Sonia would like to do for the autumn forums, it might be the October or the November one, is have that analysis on other local authorities, especially our stat neighbours, around what those deficit positions are. Ros, when you mentioned not necessarily sort of the debt written off, I think it was Devon that actually in their paper they did actually state that the DfE have written off £38 million of their DSG deficit. So I just got the terminology from that paper. But you're right. There's conditions and obviously it might be a little bit different to that. So
great, thank you, Mike, very much.
Cheers, thanks.
Okay, moving on. We now move on to the verbal update about extended early years entitlements. Christina, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Christina Lewis, Head of Early Years and Childcare. Again, like Gemma, no formal paper from me this time because we're not expecting a change to the funding rates, which is what I normally bring papers around, until April, when there will be a review, but well, to be implemented in April. So I will be bringing a paper sooner than that for your consideration, but nothing at the moment. I think this time last year we had an exception because the DfE did do a mid-year change in the September, and I had to bring something at this point. But that's not normal. But I thought I'd just give you an update on how the extended entitlements is going, the rollout of that, because that is a significant policy development for us. So from April, the 2-year-olds of working parents became eligible for 15 hours of funding. So this is our first term of processing those. To date, we have had an additional 2,767 claims. So that's all those are new claims, new to that funding. We are currently processing the late claims that come in later in the term, so we expect that to increase. So I'm thinking it will be around about the 3,000 mark. From my perspective, from an LA perspective, it's gone quite smoothly. We have had the IT in place to be able to make that work, to check the codes and to accept the codes for payment. So from my perspective, that bit's gone smoothly. Also, we haven't had parents contacting us saying they can't find a place. I suspect, though, that a lot of the children who are now being claimed for were already in a setting as a fee-paying child, so we call them converters. So a lot of these 3,000 will have already been in a place, so we haven't had to create new places. They've just changed from being fee paying to being funded. However, in September we have the from 9-month-olds coming on board. A few of them, a small percentage of them, will be converters, but there'll be far more who are new to the system. So we're thinking it's going to be different in September, and we're gearing up for that and working with our providers at the moment to create the spaces. But fortunately, I've been in a bit of a panic about if we had to. We always base our predictions on if 100% took it up, but the DfE have now issued that they expect around 60% of eligible 1-year-olds and only 35% of eligible 9-month-olds to access in September. So that gives me a little bit of comfort that we're not trying to create as many places as I thought we were. But I've said that it's gone quite smoothly, the new 2-year-old. I don't know if any colleagues in the forum from early years want to say what it's been like on the ground, whether they would agree with that.
Karen, would you like to come on camera and speak about it rather than put it in the chat? No, Karen, would you prefer just to be in the chat?
Hello, sorry.
Oh, hi.
Took me a minute to find the right button. Yes,
No
our experience is we have seen a lot of converters. Our fee-paying parents have reduced considerably this term. That's both in the nursery school and in the private daycares that run alongside. We are predicting to be much more full in September than is traditional. We find our occupancy usually tails off in July because we have a lot of school leavers or moving to school, and then we take new children in September, but then as their birthdays occur through the year, they then join us. This year we're predicting that we'll have more children in September, and we are concerned we won't have enough spaces in January and April for new starters, which is a concern both for the parents who will be looking for a place and also for us, because if they find a place somewhere else in the meantime, they won't want to come to us later on, because parents don't tend to change settings once they're settled.
Thank you, Karen.
Amanda, you've got your hand up too. You're on mute at the moment, Amanda.
Sorry about that. Yes, I agree, Karen.
No problem.
We're seeing a similar thing at the moment. They're converters with 1 or 2 extras, but the inquiries that we've had for September and January and April, people trying to get in in advance are new, but similarly we think that availability come January and April will be very limited.
Percentage wise, do you think 60%, 70%, 80% of requests will be met, or can't you get a feel for that yet? Do you have any idea? No.
I personally haven't got a feel for that yet. Yes,
No,
I can't
and
predict.
nor have we at a county
Right.
level. We haven't got a feel for that yet either.
So Christina, if you need to try to create new places, what's the planning that you're doing for that? Can you give us a brief overview of that, please?
Yeah, we do business checks with providers to see if they could restructure their days slightly differently to free up more spaces, because if they offer their sessions in different ways, you might be able to get 3 children in a day rather than 2 or whatever, as they currently do, because children don't always go in for the whole day. So you might have 1 at lunchtime, one in the morning, 1 in the afternoon. But if you restructure your day and extend it a bit, you might be able to get 3 in. And we've also got a small amount of capital to do expansion with as well. And so where someone maybe could turn a fair sized cupboard into a baby room, or could have an extra toilet, and it would mean that they could then take more children. We're looking at things like that. But also one of the big issues as well is the lack of workforce available. So we are working with a lot of colleges and the Job Centre Plus, etc., to try and create opportunities. And we're working with our skills colleagues to bring early years boot camps into Suffolk as well, as a way of introducing people into the early years workforce.
Super. Thanks for that summary, Christina. I think that was helpful context for the members of the forum to hear. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Any other questions or points? Nobody's putting their hand up. So thank you all very much for that. So we move on to AOB, as well as the forward agenda. I think the forward agenda speaks for itself. So unless anybody's got any questions about the forward agenda, then I won't loiter on that. But there is one AOB I'd like to do today, and this is Adrian Orr's last meeting with us before he retires from the County Council in the summer. And on behalf of Forum, Adrian, I would just like to thank you enormously for all you've done. Thanks to Teresa, who looked back and found that your first meeting with Forum was on the 17th of January 2017. So you've been giving support to myself and other chairs for the last 7.5 years, for which I'm enormously grateful. Some of the key things that you've done to help Forum is that you've done a lot of work on our governance, and I know you spent a lot of time looking at the governance of other schools forums around the country so that you could present to our forum what you felt would be the best governance structure for us and the best way of running our meetings and structuring our papers and so on. So that's been really, really helpful. You always keep your eye on the national picture so that you can bring that back to us and help us understand the context of that. You've done a lot of work with the F40 group and supporting our cabinet leads in their interactions with the F40, so that's been enormously helpful. And one of the key things is the liaison work you do between your colleagues and other teams within the County Council and ourselves on Schools Forum, and that liaison work that you've done to help us understand better what roles and responsibilities the County Council have for children and how our work links with them and vice versa has been enormously helpful. So on behalf of Forum, I'd like to wish you a very happy retirement, Adrian.
Thanks, Alison. That's very, very kind. Yeah, it's a good number of years I've been supporting Forum directly. I planned my retirement about 15 months ago, and it's come around incredibly quickly. I shall miss you all greatly, and thank you, Alison, for your support as the chair. But also thanks to all of those school leaders, academy leaders, early years setting leaders, governors who contribute to Forum. We have a more complex task than ever in managing the resources that frankly aren't enough to meet all the requirements we have to meet, and we do the best job for that with the support that we get from all those of you that give up voluntarily your time from busy jobs and busy other activities to do that. And I think the impact of your work is reflected in the facts that Michael shared, that although yes, we have got a huge sort of deficit, actually on a lower level of funding, our deficit is less than some authorities that get significantly more money than we do. So I wish you all the best for the future. Thank you.
Likewise. Thank you, Adrian. So on that note, we'll meet again on Thursday, the 3rd of October. I wish you all a very happy summer, and I hope you get a chance to unwind and relax at some point before we meet again. I'll now close the meeting. Thanks all very much for today. Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.